Hello again, Nassim here with Masters Photography. In this third part of the video, I will talk about setting up your on-camera pop-up flash as a wireless commander. But before I do that, I'd like to go through just the very basics of flash communication, wireless flash communication. Whenever you deal with setting up more than one speed light or more than one flash, whether it's two speed lights or more, or maybe your on-camera pop-up flash and a single speed light, you have to have one master, because the master is the one that sends the signal to the slave units. So in this case, we'll talk about setting up your on-camera pop-up flash today as the master, but when the communication happens between the flashes, the master sends the signal very quickly to the slave units so that they both can fire at the same time. So remember, one master and one or more slaves. When we set up the on-camera pop-up flash as the wireless commander, you have multiple options. You can set up your on-camera pop-up flash as the master that also fires the flash, or you can set it so that it doesn't fire the flash but triggers the slave. A lot of you might be asking the question, why would you even want to use your on-camera pop-up flash as the master? Well, if you have one speed light, you're probably doing the same thing I did when I got my first Nikon speed light, which is basically mounting it on top of the camera and using it in different configurations. The great thing about these speed lights is that you can shoot them straight like this, which is basically no different than using your on-camera pop-up flash, because it's still harsh direct light. But the great thing is these are very flexible for you to be able to bounce the light off your ceilings, walls, etc., etc. But the problem is when it's still flash sitting on top of your camera. No matter how much you turn it, no matter what diffusers you use, it is still going to be a very simple, plain light. As soon as you take your flash off the camera, you can get really creative, because you can use umbrellas, you can shoot through an umbrella, you can bounce the light off of an umbrella, you can use different types of umbrellas. There's all kinds of cool stuff you can do when you take your flash off the camera. And the Nikon cameras, if you are using one of the more advanced semi-pro or higher camera body, these come with the feature to control other flashes or work as commanders. Unfortunately, if you have an entry-level Nikon DSLR like Nikon D3100 or D5000, those cameras do not have the feature. But like I said earlier, if you have a semi-pro or pro body, like in my hands I'm holding the Nikon D700, that has a pop-up flash, it will come with this great feature. So let's talk about setting up your camera pop-up flash as the commander. When you set up the flash, you have multiple options. One option is to use your on-camera pop-up flash to shoot the flash or to work as a flash unit and at the same time trigger the remote. And the second option is to basically not fire the flash and only trigger the slave. Few nuances here and there, and I'll discuss that a little bit later, but whenever you set it up this way, there is still something called a pre-flash. If you remember earlier when I talked about through the lens technology, in order for the camera to understand how much flash power is needed on your subject, it needs to first fire a pre-flash. And the pre-flash happens very quickly. Basically, it fires the flash, and then the light is returned from your subject back into the camera. And that's why it's called through the lens, because the light hits the subject, bounces back from the subject through the lens into the camera quickly evaluates whether that was too much light or more light is needed. Basically, it happens in a matter of milliseconds. A very quick method of calculation, and then once the camera knows how much power it needs, then it instructs the flash unit to fire at half a power or maybe full power or less. So that communication is extremely important, and that's why there is that pre-flash. So whenever you set up your on-camera commander, your on-camera pop-up flash as the commander, that pre-flash will happen no matter whether it's firing the actual flash or not. So that's kind of something, that's the important part to remember, because if you're if you're working with a subject that's very close to you and you're using a very large aperture, maybe high ISO, what might happen is that pre-flash might actually screw up your image by illuminating flash on your subject's body or face. And that's where you have to be a little bit careful. So remember the pre-flash, whether you're turning it off or using it as a flash, it will still fire that pre-flash. So let's quickly configure the camera and the flash to work together in a configuration where the slave or the speed light is the slave unit. In my D700, I simply go into menu, and this is all explained in the article with this video, but I go into the bracketing flash options under custom settings menu, and then I go into flash control for built-in flash. Under commander mode, I set up the built-in flash to basically nothing. 2 dashes means main flash is turned off, just pre-flash. Then I'm going to go into group A and set it to TTL. I'm not going to worry about the group B because I'm only using one speed light in this example. But under group A, set it up to TTL. Channel is set up to 1, and I'll go through that a little bit later, what the channels and groups mean. But set the channel to 1 for now. What's important to remember is whatever settings you're applying here. If you're using group A channel 1, you have to choose group A channel 1 on the speed light as well. So with everything set up, I just click OK, which will then make the pop-up flash a commanding unit. So the camera is all set up, we're good to go. Now I'm going to use the speed light. The great thing about the new Nikon speed lights, in my hands I'm holding the Nikon SB900, with the SB900 and the newly announced SB700, you don't have to go into the menu options and hold the button for 3-5 seconds. All you have to do is simply, with this rotating button right here, or dial here, you just go into remote, and within that remote, it basically, the speed light is already set up for remote communication. And then there's also master here on the SB700. I believe there are very limited options to use the speed light as a master. But anyway, once you set it up as the remote here, this is basically good to go. The only thing that I need to check, as I said earlier, is making sure that my group is set to A and my channel is set to 1. And it is set by default that way. So the flash is ready to go. Now, obviously, before I fire this, gotta turn on the pop-up flash. Now watch what happens when I fire this. As you saw, the speed light fired and this unit fired as well. But the reason why this fired is because that's the way it communicates with the speed light, and pre-flash needs to happen. So again, don't be surprised, even if you turn it off, it will still fire that pre-flash. Okay, so let's now talk about the groups and channels. If you remember earlier, when I set up my on-camera pop-up flash to be the commander, I set it to channel 1, and then I set up my slave and the camera for group A. So what are the groups for and what are the channels for? The channel is basically to separate your form of communication between you and your flashes. Why would you want to do that? If you're shooting outside with another photographer and they're using the same Nikon system, they will also have their own group A, group B, most likely, and if they're in your range, if they're shooting on the same channel, what will end up happening whenever that photographer takes a picture, he will also trigger your flashes. Why? Because they're sitting on the same channel. So by selecting a different channel in a scenario like that, if I'm shooting with a photographer that has exactly the same setup, I'll approach that person and say, hey, what channel are you shooting in? If that person says, I'm shooting in channel 1, then I'll set up my camera and flashes in channel 2. If there are 3 or more photographers, I have the option of shooting up to 4 in up to 4 different channels. So that's what the channel is for. Typically, channel 1 works great. There are not many situations when you'll have photographers like that with you shooting outside. So channel 1 is typically what I leave it at. But let's talk about the groups now. If you're using the on-camera pop-up flash as the commander, you only have 2 groups, Group A and Group B. If you're shooting with a Nikon SB800 or SB900 or any other remote that has that capability to be the master, then you can set up the speed light to have Group A, Group B, and Group C. What are those for? Now let's talk about an example. If I'm shooting, taking a picture, a portrait of a subject, and let's say they're in a studio environment, and I'm just in front of the person, I set up my speed light as a slave in front, maybe shooting through an umbrella. If I want to add some more light to the subject, for example, some rim light, I would use another speed light and place that speed light behind the subject. So this one is on the front, this one is on the back. Now, how would I tell how much power to fire for the rim light? If I set them both up in the same group, what will happen, even if I use TTL, most likely the rim light is going to fire too much flash. So in that case, I need to control it, and I need to set it so that it fires a lot less flash. What I could do is I could take this guy and set it in Group A, and then take the rim light or the second speed light and set it in Group B. Then within the camera, I can set and I can say use TTL for the first flash, and for the second flash set it to manual mode at maybe 1/32 of flash power. So, or I can say shoot it in TTL also, but use flash compensation of -2, which means basically that shoot in TTL mode, but underpower that flash so that it's not firing too much flash at my subject. So that's what the groups are for, basically different types of communication. The last thing I wanted to talk about today is the limitation of the Nikon Creative Lighting System. While I really like all these features like iTTL on these speed lights and cameras, the biggest issue is the way that these speed lights communicate with each other. Unfortunately, the method of communication is through infrared. And what that means is it's essentially the same thing as your remote talking to your TV. If there is an object in between, or you're trying to do it from another room, or the distance is too big, the slave unit is simply not going to trigger. So that's something you have to keep in mind, especially when shooting outside in broad daylight. You will be in situations where you might be even relatively close, but that slave is just not going to fire. Fortunately, there are great products out there that overcome this limitation using radio technology instead of infrared, and we'll talk about those different types of products a little bit later this week. But that's just something to keep in mind when you're shooting, especially like I said, outside. So our next topic of discussion is going to be speed lights. I know we talked about these a little bit, but I really want to spend some time talking about different types of configurations, differences between the Nikon speed lights, which one you should buy for your needs, and at the same time when you should be using them on the camera, off the camera, in which types of situations. I know that in winter there are not that many opportunities for those who live in colder environments to go out and shoot outside. So if you're indoors and taking pictures of your family, especially for Christmas, then hopefully our next video is going to be very helpful. So stay tuned, lots of information coming. We'll do a lot of flash photography, not only articles but also videos to accompany them so that you can understand this in more detail. If you have any questions, please feel free to post the questions in the comment section below, and I will do my best to respond as soon as I can. Thank you very much.